Welcome back, everybody, to Hoops HD. It is Monday, December
Woohoo!
11th. We've got a three-man crew tonight, a little smaller crew than normal, but this is our
We
Hoops HD
decided to
report.
only go with the good people tonight. You screw the rest of those guys.
Unfortunately, they couldn't show, so you got the three of us.
Right, yeah.
I'm your host, Chad
Very
Shirley.
true.
John Titel over here. David Griggs down below. We are going to go through everything that's going on, what happened on the court, and all the major conferences, a few other things. But before we get to any of that, Griggs, we want to start with a proposal that came out, probably about 5 or 6 days ago now, in the middle of last week, from NCAA President Charlie Baker. It's not been adopted or anything like that yet, but it's a proposal to create what he called a subdivision within D1 that individual schools would have the options to opt in or out of. And if you opt into it, you would have the ability to pay your players directly out of a trust fund that your school would set up. The trust fund thing is, I believe, is a way to try to avoid these players actually becoming employees and bringing all the problems that can come with all of that. Um, I want to get your thoughts on it, as Titel about it a little bit,
Okay.
and then I'll throw my own thoughts in there after the two of you
Okay.
go.
Well, to further explain it,
Yes,
in his
please.
proposal, and in the way this is, anybody can really propose anything. It doesn't mean it's going to get on the ballot and be voted on. But if you're the president, it's going to get on the ballot and be voted on. So this will be voted on by the membership, by the board of directors. And he called it a subdivision. I have an issue with him using that phrase because a subdivision, they're really there's only one sport that has a subdivision, and that's the FBS and the FCS with Division I football. It's all Division I, but there's two different subdivisions. One is a bowl subdivision, and one is the championship subdivision. This really isn't a subdivision, as I understand it. I'll get your all's thoughts, but what it really is a different set of rules for a certain demographic of teams that would opt into this. We'll call it a subdivision because that's what he called it. But the parameters were, as you said, that they could pay their players. They would be required in order membership in this subdivision would mean you have to pay more than 50%. So if you have 300 athletes, you'd have to pay 151 of them minimum, a minimum of $30,000 or more. You could pay them more. You could pay more than half if you wanted to, but that would be a minimum for being in this. And opting in is just that. It's optional. Like it's anybody that would choose to do it could. And the other caveat to
Right. So,
this,
so, 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 so Griggs, it
yeah,
doesn't mean you have to be in the SEC to opt in. You
you
could
do not.
be an America East school. You could be an Ivy League school. Not that they would, but you could be any school to opt in.
Yes, and this is what is strange because he makes reference particularly to top level FBS football, and I guess that would be the Power Four now. But he never stated in his proposal that it was limited to just those schools. He never even said you needed to play football at the FBS level or play football at all. All it said was more than half of your student athletes need to be paid a minimum of $30,000 a year to opt in. The other piece to this was that they would have more autonomy than what the Power Five currently has, meaning they could make their own rules that would not apply to the rest of the D1 membership. I would imagine one of those rules may be if they decide to go that route, that they collectively decide you do need to play football at the FBS level and that you have to have a minimum number of student athletes. You can't have just 80. You need to have 400 or 500 or wherever they put the minimum at. I would also think this is just me guessing. I'm not claiming to be an insider or somebody that works in athletics, but I would guess that there would also be they would roll back the transfer policies even more, at least from if you're transferring from outside the subdivision into it, there is no year of residency. And another rule that I would anticipate is the roster caps and the scholarship caps would go away. Right now, for men's basketball, the sport we focus on, you're allowed 15 roster spots maximum and 13 full scholarships. I would imagine they would either
Well,
increase that or take it
that's
away
not
entirely.
your part of his proposal. You're two things.
It's not part of his
You're taking
proposal.
another step.
Yeah, I'm taking another step to what I think the rules might be that they would set up for themselves once they become their own
Yeah,
subdivision.
but also with this subdivision, like I said, right now the way he proposed it, anybody could join, no matter what conference
Yes.
you're in. Although it was no, one of the footnotes here was, it's possible you could see conferences saying either A, you have to be in this, like a
Yeah,
Power Five conference, or B, you could not be in this, like something like the Ivy League might say, obviously would say you cannot be in this group and we're not going to allow you to pay your players. But uh,
right.
and so theoretically, if like suddenly the America East turned around and said you cannot be in this, and
And be America
University
East.
of Maine, the University of Maine really wants to pay its players. Uh, we could see some division realignment come out of it, some conference realignment come out of it
Yeah.
down the way as well. But uh, Tytel, any thoughts from you on this proposal here to throw even more money at players?
Several, but as I am opposed to the general concept, like you said, it's going to be mostly negative stuff. And I am also not an expert on the entire proposal, but it just seems like it creates a gazillion problems. Like it seems like last year the whole focus was on like get money into their pockets, so because they're gonna like help us win games and championships and stuff. And now it's like, well, keep getting them money, but make sure they're not employees because that's now like the most important thing. And with the
uh,
thing
uh,
about the fifty
yeah,
percent rule,
I'll just quickly throw it out there. Part of the proposal did mention none of this would affect the name, image, and likeness money. Still, everybody's still able to get that too on top of this.
Yes.
So, so this is
thank
just
God, I
more
was
money.
worried that you're going to be
Yeah,
starving and homeless. I'm
yeah.
glad we avoided that
Mhm.
crisis.
Yeah.
As far as the 50% rule, it seems to me that if you have a choice of helping out like 100 football players or 12 members of the women's golf team, that just based on a numbers game, you're going to go to football. So I'm a little concerned how it's going to affect the other sports at schools. Third, it creates this sense of both elitism that like the rich get richer or stay rich while the others don't, and the haves and have-nots, and that like I love Vermont basketball. I don't see how they can compete with like the power conferences because every single guy who cares about getting paid is going to go play for the power conferences, right?
That is my concern, John. That's been my concern for a long time. And I will say this: when we went to cost of living stipends, I really thought when the Power Five implemented that that the separation between the haves and the have-nots was going to grow infinitely. And then while we're sort of still in the infancy of it, or I thought the same when name, image, and likeness came along. But over the last year, which was really the first NCAA tournament where name, image, and likeness played a role, we saw Florida Atlantic go deep into the tournament. We saw a 15 seed in the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row. And I'm starting to think, is this just an anomaly, or is for whatever reason, and I don't know what that reason is, the gap not growing between the haves and the have-nots? Are the under the radar schools able to compete more now than they ever have before? And if they are, I don't know how.
I would just say, Griggs, I think it's something that you would have to wait 3, 4 years after it's implemented to really see the results. So
Yeah,
I don't know that like the Florida Atlantic runs and the 15 seed runs that we've seen really is something that's kind of temporary. It might be going away in a year or two just on the NAL. It's on its own,
yeah,
but because I don't think that I think everyone's still learning the NIL rules, and now we're going to throw more money at these kids and more money at these kids. And uh,
right.
although on the other hand, you can see less and less kids opting for the NBA early because they may be making as much money in college as they would in the NBA, which is really kind of I don't know that I like that. I like the best players staying in school longer, but I don't know that this is the way I wanted to ever see it get done.
Yeah, and what it feels like to me, and this is just my opinion, is there's just this desire, I guess, from a lot of the big money power athletic departments and programs to make sure that like they have all the advantage and that they have a status like a designation that is special, that is elite, that no one else has. uh and they're trying to separate themselves rather than compete. And one of the things that I hate about college sports in general, and I've said this before, and particularly in college basketball, it seems like instead of beating teams, sometimes schools would rather just systematically shut them out. McNeese State can't get a game because why would you want to play against them when you can just avoid them? And is this sort of the power school's way of putting even more separation between them and everybody else?
Well, the good news is it's only a proposal, has not been adopted. Bad
Yeah,
news is we'll see what
it
happens here over
likely
the
will
next few
be.
months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and move to what was on the court, though. And let me go ahead and bring the screen share up here. as we start going through some of the standings. Before we actually go into games, just for those of you that were not here last week on Under the Radar when we first throw it out there, a couple changes on what you're seeing on the screen here. First of all of our metrics are now showing up. So we've got the net rating, the strength of schedules, KPI, which had not been here. We also have a new column though in our predictive metrics. These are now the Torvik rankings or the T rankings. We had used to show the Sagarin ratings. Sagarin is no longer doing rankings in college basketball, so we found a replacement ranking. And the Torvik is one of the more widely followed rankings out there. Title, I think you've been following him for a while too, haven't you? Or
A little, but like I am a Sagarin guy. I mean, imagine a world without bracketology or without like NIL money. Now we have a world without Sagarin ratings. What the hell's happening, Chad?
I'll tell you what, John. I remember Sagarin rankings back when I was in high school. This was the first. I think he was the first major ranking out there, major one through everybody ranking out there, and it was one of the ones that I remember always looking at. Oh, they were updated, Sagarin updated, and I get my latest episode of USA Today newspaper, the actual real newspaper, not a website.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an era, end of the era with Sagarin going away here, at least in college
Why
basketball.
did he shut it down?
I'm not certain. I know that he did do football this year, but he left USA Today as of the beginning, for football. He was not there with USA Today anymore, and I don't know the reason. I just was able to confirm. We did confirm that he is not doing college basketball this year.
Well, Jeff, if you're out there and you need a home, come on over to HoopsHD. You can post your rankings on our site.
Yeah, you got to go up against Joby though.
Yeah, you got to go up against Joby.
He's a resume. You're predictive. We can go.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
We got the Big 12 standings up here. The reason why I threw the Big 12 up here is there are 7 undefeated teams left in the nation. 3 of them are in this conference. 3 of the top 6 teams in the nation are here as well, in Houston, Baylor, and Kansas. But Tytel, I actually want to start with another team that I know you wanted to discuss here, because I think we've been kind of a little bit almost ignoring them all season. They had the best week, I think, of anybody in this conference, arguably, and that is the Oklahoma Sooners with their nice wins over Providence and Arkansas, and now sitting here at number 11 in the AP poll and 9-0 overall.
But only 6th in their conference in the net, which is insane, and a separate issue, I suppose.
Yeah.
I would argue they're the most surprising of the 7 undefeated teams. This is a team that went 5-13 in the Big 12 last year, but wins over Providence and Arkansas, now 9-0. They get the whole week off before hosting Green Bay Saturday. Then they travel to Charlotte for a quote-unquote neutral site game against the Tar Heels. That's actually looking now like a potential Sweet 16 matchup, at least on paper. Coach Porter Moser's team is getting it done both ends of the floor. On defense, they allow 26% shooting behind the arc. That's top 10 in the nation. On offense, they shoot 60% inside the arc and 79% at the free throw line, also both top 10 in the nation. And I wanted to give a shout out to their junior big man, John Hughley IV. So 2022, he was honorable mention All ACC player at Pitt. Last year, he started exactly 1 game due to both a knee injury and some mental health issues. The good news, he is now of both sound mind and body, 11 points and 6 boards a game, and the shooting is ridiculous. 63% from the field, 54% behind the arc, 85% at the free throw line.
Wow. Griggs, on the right there, I've got another one of these undefeated teams here, the Baylor Bears, almost quietly number 6 in the nation, just because they haven't had a real tough contest since they played Auburn and Florida back in November. But they've got the next 2 games are pretty big. Well, the second of the 2 at least.
Yeah, that's a good point. In the case of both these teams, like the Iowa game for Oklahoma was a good game, USC was a good game, Arkansas certainly a good game, Baylor, the 2 in the tier 1, Auburn and Florida. But it seems like that, we've had so many showcases, not just with the Maui, but like multiple top 10 matchups every week, that it almost took the spotlight away from Baylor, from Oklahoma, and these teams that are also playing at a really high level and playing really well. I don't know how you can be 6th and be quiet, but Baylor seems to have done it. As much basketball as we watched, we haven't really talked about either one of these teams much before now. But yeah, this is a really, really good Baylor team, obviously. One of the few unbeatens. I like them as much just about as anyone in this conference, minus maybe Kansas. I think that they're certainly about to step it up. Their next three or their next four are really big games with Mississippi Valley kind of sandwiched in there. Um, but yeah, I think Baylor is a Sweet 16 caliber team. I think that they're certainly deserving of the number 6 ranking. And whether they're sixth or eighth or whatever, I think they're one of the 10 best teams in the country.
Yeah. When we look at it, going back to the conference overall here, the other notable games here, Kansas, Griggs, they beat their big rivals. Of course, I'm talking about the Kansas City game on
Yeah, the
Tuesday, correct?
Kansas City game, and most people don't understand what a big game that is.
Yeah, but how about winning the border war there? Missouri had to get a bit of a battle, but they found a way.
They did. It was exciting for about 15 minutes. Mizzou actually had a lead for that long, but Kansas, I mean, they just went on a flurry toward the end of the half and never looked back. I don't want to say it was a blowout, but it wasn't close or exciting either. And really, since they've resumed it, it hasn't. None of the games have been exciting. But whoever wanted that rivalry to resume anyway?
I don't know. I don't know. I got no idea. And actually, when it comes to rivalries, this conference suffered a couple of losses here with BYU losing that game to Utah and Cincinnati losing to Xavier. Since for both those teams, as well as for TCU on Saturday, all suffering their first losses of the season. So this team conference could have had 6 undefeated teams still,
well,
but for
well,
those three
well,
games.
a couple of those were not like the others. TCU racked up a lot of wins against teams that were combined like 2-50 or whatever it was
Hmm.
at home. Then they had the questionable win at Georgetown, and then Cincinnati. All home bye wins except the one win at Howard, which they needed overtime to do. BYU though is legit. If you watch that game, I didn't get to see the first half, so that's when they sort of fell way behind, but they really did battle to get back into it in front of, I mean, one of the more hostile atmospheres you'll ever see. And I know that this isn't fair because I didn't see the first half, Chad, but if you watch the second half, it was kind of hard to not be impressed with BYU, even though they didn't win.
Uh, yeah, no, Title, I can't. Even though they lost that game, I think he's right. I think this BYU team is for real this year.
I think it's too early to tell, even
Okay.
though I like the metrics, I like the record, obviously, but
And you
I
love
see
what they did back on November 23rd.
Yeah.
game of the year. But like I see 5-0 at home and 0-1 on the road, and I know 3-0 neutral. But I'm not sold just yet. They got several cupcakes ahead. If they beat Cincinnati at home, I don't even know if that's an upset. If they win
It's
at
not.
Baylor in January, put me on the bandwagon. But they're good. I'm not sold that they're Sweet 16 good just yet.
Okay, fair enough. And by the way, you see up there, the Big 12 did win the final few games of the Big 12 Big East Challenge this week. It ends up being a 7-4 win, despite things like Texas losing the game to Marquette, which was, I believe, was the last game of the challenge. But we'll throw up the upcoming schedule here in the Big 12, and there are some interesting games coming up on Saturday, including
Uh,
Kansas at Indiana, Cincinnati Dayton game,
yeah.
maybe Texas LSU, maybe.
Right. Let me ask you guys about Texas real quick because they're ranked in the top 25. I did a bracket today, and I know both of you feel it's too early to do that. I didn't even select them. None of their wins have been anything other than home bye games. What do you guys think of them? Are they good? I know that they at least have potential, but that's a lot of. I think there's about 150 teams that would have the same record with that schedule.
Yes,
Yeah, go
sure,
ahead,
Chad.
Titel. Okay,
They
I'll
beat
just,
great
yeah, go. One of us, go ahead.
they beat terrible teams and lose to great teams, which is what most people in America do.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of cupcake action coming up, and then we'll see when they get into the meat of the schedule when they have Baylor, Oklahoma, BYU, Houston all in a row there in late January. That's going to be the true test. Metrics look solid, but again, not sold because they're doing what most teams would do, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, Griggs, if this was a blind resume late in the season and you see no wins in the top 3 tiers, you're not taking this team. So I can't
No.
fault you for that, but uh, I think that this is a good team, and I think this will be, probably a maybe not a protected seed, but maybe a top 5 or top 6 seed come the end of the day.
Yeah.
Uh, Although you never know. That's why they play
Right.
the games, right? Uh,
That is why they play them.
let's go to the other half of this Big East Big 12 Challenge series here with the Big East standings. And Titel, I'll start with you with a team that maybe one of the more surprising teams out to an 8-2 start is this Butler team.
Bit of a roller coaster. 3-2 on Thanksgiving night after back-to-back losses to the Spartans and FAU. Quality losses, I'll give them that. But since then, 5 wins in a row to get to 8-2. Ugly 7-point double overtime home win over Cal on Saturday. They were down 16-4
Super
after the
ugly.
first 7 minutes. Thankfully,
Yeah.
came back to avoid a horrible loss. The next 2 games are at home, one against Saginaw Valley State, one against Georgetown. I assume we're all okay with me calling them both cupcakes.
Yes.
Coach Thad Mott has been getting it done
The
with offense.
Saginaw Valley game might be a little bit tougher of a game, actually,
Yeah.
but go ahead.
I think so. Thad Matta is getting it done on offense, 57% inside the arc, 78% at the free throw line, are both top 25 in the nation. And the biggest surprise has been actually a transfer of one of the teams they lost to, Sparty, Pierre Brooks. This guy was a top 60 recruit out of Detroit back in 2021. If you look at the rankings back then, he was ahead of future NBA guys like Brandon Pajemski, Jeremy Sohan. He was above them. Gets to East Lansing, doesn't even average 3 points a game in 55 games for Tom Izzo. Comes to the Big East and he exploded this year. 17 points a game, 41% behind the arc. So the lesson is always, if at first you don't succeed, become a Butler.
All right, Griggs. I pulled up on the right there Marquette, who had this probably the signature win for this conference this week, or arguably at least, with Shaka's home win over his former Texas squad there.
Yeah, and that had to be cathartic for Shaka Smart. He was let go from Texas after earning a 3 seed. I can't ever. I'm still amazed by that decision. And anyway, I guess it worked out okay for him, and I hope he enjoyed himself that weekend. But this is a team that, if you ask me who am I picking to win it all, it won't be Marquette, but they are certainly very much in the debate. They've beaten Kansas. They went to Illinois and won. Both of those probably protected seeds. Certainly Kansas potentially a number one. When you look at their losses by 3 to Purdue, Purdue, a lot of people have them number one or number two, and they didn't lose by much. So this is a team that's very, very much in the 1 seed, 2 seed range, I think, and certainly one of the 10 best teams in the country. I mean, we've been saying it all year, and it's not a surprise that they're as good as they are, and they already have managed the wins that they have.
Yeah. Far as the rest of the conference here, I would note Rutgers did win at Seton Hall, deservedly so, because we all know that Rutgers.
Well,
that's
after
that's
what
actually part
happened
of
to
the
them
Big Ten
last year,
discussion.
yes, they deserve to win that.
But Titel, I want to ask you about one other team here, and that's this Villanova team. The worst team in the Philadelphia Big Five loses the overtime game to K-State, but then bounces back with a win over UCLA. I can't figure this team out. Can you?
Yes, it's called Jekyll and Hyde, Chad. And
Okay.
the funny thing is that they're in a 5-team division of Big Five. They're the 6th best team, which is hilarious. Losing to my Quakers at the Palestra, arguably inexcusable. Obviously, I'm not going to give it back, but they do have several top 100 wins: Maryland, Texas Tech, Carolina in overtime, Memphis, and the UCLA game you just mentioned. They have a big game next week at Creighton, so we'll see if they can get back, keep riding the momentum. Um, it They had a lot of hiccups, I'll give you that, but like 2-point loss to Drexel, overtime 1-point loss to Kansas State, 4 points to Penn. They're a few points away from being like 10-1, so I wouldn't push the panic button. They're also the best free throw shooting team in the country at 82%, so they should be winning those close games because they make their free throws. It just hasn't worked out totally yet.
Yeah, and I look at things like their adjusted offensive, adjusted defensive rankings, both top 40 in the nation.
Yeah.
You would think that that's going to translate into a lot of wins here.
You would think. Where are you as far as Kyle Neptune? I've been a fan of his ever since he went 16-16 at Fordham. I didn't think that was possible before he did it.
Well, now he wants to go 16-16 at Villanova. So
Right.
hey.
Well, they struggled mightily last year, and I was like, well, first year, this year he's going to get it done, and he still could. But like, where I'm just kind of curious. Well, Tytel and both of you, where are you as far as he goes? Is he the guy that can get this done?
Chad?
I honestly, I don't think he is.
Okay.
I think that, and if he doesn't get something turned around here this season, I don't know that he's even the head coach there next
Right.
year, because that's
It's hard to follow
that's the
Jay
era
Wright.
we are
I get
living
it.
in now. Is
Yeah.
that it's a shame because I don't want to see somebody fired after only 2 seasons, but it's possible, especially given what was predicted for this team this year. If they end up
Yeah.
finishing outside of the NCAA tournament uh, with this roster, I think that's an indictment on him, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, Upcoming schedules on the screen, and Griggs, there's two key games here. Al Creighton is going to be hosting Alabama, and a
That's a
huge
good
game
one.
and a huge game Friday night. UConn, who we didn't discuss, they beat North Carolina last week, also. Playing Gonzaga I believe it's in Seattle, though, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that game is in Seattle. I mean, it'll be a pro Gonzaga crowd, I would imagine.
Yeah.
A big fan base out in Seattle. They always try and play a showcase game in Seattle. Um, Gonzaga actually playing right now as we watch this, sort of against Mississippi Valley State.
Are they up by 50 yet?
Yeah, trying to bounce back from kind of the road loss, well, to Washington in Seattle. So, but yeah, that's a big win. I think Connecticut goes out there and beats them.
Oh, really?
UConn's really
Okay.
good. So's Gonzaga, but not quite as good as Connecticut. And even though it's a pro Gonzaga crowd, I just think the Huskies are really good.
That's a tight tell. Let's jump over to the Pac-12, and I'll give you a chance, first of all, before we get to the other team I know you want to discuss the number one team in the nation, the number one team in the net. It is your Arizona Wildcats who continued on
Really
with a
struggling in the KPI. Your thoughts on that, Tom?
yeah, I would say but the dominating performance against a Wisconsin team that we know beat Marquette, who we were just hyping.
Yeah.
Yes, deserving of much love. The strength of schedule, as you see, is triple digits. Every other metric is top five, so that's certainly a concern. Although when you look like tier one, tier two, like big time programs from big time conferences.
Look at their next three games. I'm not too
Yeah,
worried about the
the
strength of
one
schedule
for
staying
yeah,
down.
the 131 is strength of schedule so far. I have a feeling that's going to improve.
It is. I certainly hope we don't go 0-3 against all three of those teams that are not going to be in Tucson. But I certainly, um, I don't love our chances to go 3-0. Like those are three of the top 20 teams in the nation, as you see. If we go 2-1 and like foul Edie 50 times, like maybe we will like sneak out of there with our number one overall ranking. But the Purdue game is going to be a huge challenge, obviously, pun intended.
Griggs, on the right there, I pulled up Colorado, who had their first notable win of the season this past just yesterday, beating Miami and beat them in dominating fashion too.
Yeah, I mean, it was really impressive. I was big on the Miami team, that Miami team coming into the year. I guess I still am. I kind of am curious to see what they look like as we get into Christmas break and you have a lot more practice time. That's when you see a lot of teams that maybe got off to slow starts start to really improve. Um, but it was before that game, they went into Colorado State, who's really good, and put up a fight, but they had not looked anything near that good at any point prior to Saturday. Not that I had seen.
And we may want to start circling this January 4th game at Arizona, although Arizona, as we mentioned, has a test to get through before they get there. Uh,
Yeah.
Tytel, how about the team I just pulled up on the left there, the USC Trojans?
So I don't know if you guys remember a couple of months ago during the Pac-12 preview podcast, there was an anonymous member of the panel, not here tonight, who said this Trojan team just might be good enough to make a deep run in March, I believe, or a Final Four berth or something like that.
Did I say
Allow me
that?
to give him a counterpoint. Here it is. So after celebrating the debut of McDonald's All-American Bronny James by blowing a 17-point first half lead in a home overtime loss to the Beach, USC is now 5-4. They finally will get their first road game all season on Sunday when they head to Auburn, who's 6-2. Good luck. The
Yeah.
backcourt does look great. Boogie Ellis keeps scoring. McDonald's All-American Isaiah Collier keeps passing the ball, unfortunately turning it over as well. And Kobe Johnson on the wing, he might be the National Defensive Player of the Year. He's amazing on defense. The rest of the supporting cast, they just don't strike fear in me or anybody else, I think. So unless Bronny can start using those great genes to his advantage, forget the tournament. I don't know if this team's going to make the NIT, Chad.
Yeah, and you know what though, but their crosstown rivals UCLA are kind of in the same boat too. It's been, these are two teams I think on that podcast we said these were tournament teams, and I think we're proving ourselves wrong. Uh,
Yeah. UCLA in particular, because there were moments where I kind of was impressed with how they've played. Their profile's not impressive, but close losses to Gonzaga and Marquette out in Maui.
A huge game with Ohio State in the CBS Sports Classic this weekend. I think that's
Right. But that is, and then you had like Mick Cronin in again a brilliant postseason press conference after their or post game press conference saying we're getting beat by guys that just aren't that good, which he
I
could
will.
have chosen his words a little better than that. But
I think the other two teams we got to give a shout to. We already mentioned briefly. Well, Utah's win over BYU, nice win for the Utes, and as well as Washington knocking off Gonzaga, uh,
ooh,
which is
first time
which is
in 19 years.
yeah.
I was stunned to learn that. I mean, I know Gonzaga's probably the alpha team in that series. 19 years they hadn't beaten them once.
Yeah, so this Washington team, maybe there's a little life there. Maybe it's a team we got to start watching. The upcoming schedule, though, we did mention that Arizona Purdue game, UCLA Ohio State game, um, Washington a road trip to Seattle, true road game at Seattle, I guess that is there. Let's go into the
Yeah.
screen. So, and we mentioned the USC Auburn game as well. Let's
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, Washington and Seattle play every year. Like I thought they I think it's at a neutral site, or I could be wrong, and they take turns with which team is the home team. Are they actually going to Seattle's campus?
We can double check on that, but that is, I do get this information straight from the NCAA, and the NCAA currently has that listed as a Seattle home
Okay.
game. So we
That probably
can,
means Seattle's managing the event because I think they take what's the old NBA arena up there, or is it
that,
even
that, that,
still?
isn't that Climate Pledge or
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, I thought that's where they play.
it might be there, and that may count as a Seattle home court because they play 5 or 6 home games there each
Yeah.
year, I think.
that's where the Gonzaga game is also going to be this weekend, I believe.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Um, Titel, just jump over to the SEC here, and well, why don't we start off with the Kentucky Wildcats, who did beat your Penn Quakers, and you were at that game this weekend.
They took care of me with a great seat, first row behind the basket. It did take me a half hour to find the media room due to the incompetent employees at the Wells Fargo Center. Sorry, Chad, but the truth hurts. But I did get there eventually, and
I don't work there.
I'm incompetent, but I don't work there.
Kentucky got embarrassed at home, frankly, in a loss to UNC Wilmington back on December 2nd. They took their anger out on my Quakers with a 15-point win last Saturday, and Penn did hang around for like 25 minutes, which was good. But I'm starting to become a believer in the Big Blue Nation. They destroyed Miami last month by 22. Should have beaten Kansas as well. They blew a 14-point lead in the second half. But now they have the savior, 7'1" big man, McDonald's All-American Aaron Bradshaw. His second game all year, 17 points, 11 boards, 3 blocks, 0 turnovers against an overmatched and undersized Penn front court. I think John Calipari is just going to start juggling his lineup. If he wants to go big, now he's got Bradshaw. If he wants to go small, he's got a whole bunch of wings and guards. I assume he's going to want to go big. They face North Carolina and Armando Bacot in Atlanta on Saturday. And a quick shout out to Calipari because after Cliff Ellis's retirement last Wednesday, our good friend Calipari is the winningest active D1 coach in the country, 791 wins and counting.
Wow, and he'll hit that 800 mark pretty soon this season. Griggs, I pulled up Tennessee on the right there.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny when you look at those standings; they're way down there, so you almost miss them, down in 11th place just based on overall record.
Yeah.
But this team, those losses are excusable, and picked up another huge win this week over Illinois.
Yeah, they did, and that was while it was at home, that was still a really good win. They also have a win at at Wisconsin, something that Marquette was not able to do. And you look at their losses, real competitive game against Purdue, on the road at North Carolina. I don't. I think their record is indicative of just how many insanely good teams they've played and how many they've played away from home more than anything else. This is a team that's as good as anybody in the conference.
I think you're right there. And Titel, I think it's a team that might be better than the team I pulled up on the left. Just real quick though, they are undefeated. The Ole Miss Rebels did crack the coaches poll this week. Is this team for real? They did beat Memphis and NC State. That's got to count for something. No.
It counts for a little bit, but no, they're not real yet, and they have 3 cupcakes ahead, arguably a fourth in Bryant. If they win at the team on the right on January 6th, they become a believer. But the metrics, I mean, offense and defense, both outside the top 80. Do you believe in them?
No, I don't. But so,
Yeah.
but
Good.
but they are undefeated, and if we're at the point of the season when there's only 7 of these teams left, I think it's worth it, worth a little bit of a shot out there at least.
Sure.
Yeah, if you didn't see the end of their game against UCF, like go watch the very end of it. It was incredible. I can't even explain it.
Uh, 8-1 is South. Oh wait, let me go to the upcoming schedule here first. This is the upcoming schedule in this conference. We mentioned that big Kentucky, North Carolina, and the Alabama at Creighton games this
How
week.
about
Those are
A&M Houston? Big game there.
yeah, huge game for A&M who could really use the win. A&M
Yeah.
suffered a loss this past week. They lost that game at home game to Memphis
Yeah.
on Sunday, which kind of game I thought they were going to win.
Right. Yeah, and I guess we'll talk more. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming
Well,
up.
as soon as we get to Memphis here, the American, I do want to discuss that
Yeah.
game there. But where we're going to go next? How about over to the ACC actually? Griggs, we got to mention these Clemson Tigers. Not
Yeah,
only
we do.
undefeated, gave South Carolina their first loss of the season this past week, then followed it up by giving TCU their first loss of the season. So they are they're killing everybody.
Yeah, 9-0, and again, no real serious like big time top 10 level scalps on their resume, but a
They won
lot of
at
really good wins.
They won
Like,
at Alabama. They won at Alabama. I
yeah,
think they do have a scalp on their resume. I
yeah,
disagree
okay,
with you.
that is I stand corrected. That is a protected seed caliber win, going to Alabama and winning. I think the win at Pitt is nothing to sneeze at. Like I don't know if Pitt's a tournament team or not, but it's tough to go there and beat them at home. Only home loss, and I think that they're getting better. But this is a team, a really big game coming up against Memphis later in the week. Then they go to Miami, and then they get in the conference play. But this is encouraging to see. Brad Brunell's been there for I think 14. I think this is his 14th year. If I'm mistaken, I'm sorry about that. But about that, and it looked like he might not get another chance after they failed to make the NCAA tournament a year ago. I'm bet they're glad that they hung on to him for another year. This might be the best team he's ever had since he's been there, at least with the start that they're off to.
A couple quick notes here. Pitt, that was not their only home loss. They also lost at home to Missouri, by the way.
Okay, yeah.
But next game here for Clemson at Memphis. We just
Big.
mentioned we've been holding off for this. We are going to be talking Memphis in a
Yeah.
few minutes here. This is a huge game coming up this week. It's a
Really
true
is.
road test against another what probably will end up being another quad one win at the end of the season if they can pick it up.
If they can pick it up, and that's easier said than done. I don't think Memphis is quite as good as Alabama, but it's still really hard to win there.
While the ACC was not playing the same level of games as other conferences were this week, probably the most notable other win was Syracuse going and winning at Georgetown,
Yeah.
whatever that's worth. Titel, how about what happened Sunday? BC beating St. John's?
If you can just keep it here for a second, look at the
Yeah.
BC in ninth, like you'd think blah. They're out of like traditional, not powers, but like legendary programs in Syracuse and Duke. And it's amazing, like that ninth in the ACC, they're still so much beneath you. It's amazing. As far as the Eagles, tough 6-point overtime conference loss at home to NC State to begin the month, but 3 wins in a row. A nice 6-point win over the Johnnies in Brooklyn on Sunday. Their only game the rest of this entire month is against Lehigh on December 21st, which means they should be very well rested by the time the new year rolls around. They've been great from the free throw line, 77%, top 25 in the nation. And the breakout star is the big man, 7-footer from the Netherlands, Quinton Post. He missed the first 13 games last year because of a foot injury, but was strong in ACC play last year and finished with 15 points and 6 boards a game. This year, he take it up another notch or two. 19 points, 9 boards, 3 assists, 2 blocks a game, shooting over 47% from behind the arc. And at this rate, he could end up being the league's Speler van het jaar, which is, of course, is Dutch for player of the year.
There we go.
Of course, that's what it is. Yeah. Old Kurt.
Griggs, one other team I want to address here in the negative sense of things is Florida State.
Yeah.
You know, they had that win over Colorado. We thought maybe there's something there. They played well at North Carolina. Uh, we had been talking about South Florida multiple times on our Under the Radar podcast, and we have a little saying on when we do our Under the Radar shows that if you're a power conference school or a non-under the radar school like
Yeah.
South Florida is, being the American, and you're mentioned multiple times in the Under the Radar podcast, it's not good because it means multiple teams are beating you, which is what has
Yeah.
happened with South Florida, and
And
yet South Florida goes and beats Florida State this weekend by 16 after
by
suffering home losses to Maine, Central Michigan earlier this year.
yeah, I mean, a big win for South Florida. I don't want to take anything away from them, but Florida State just all in all really disappointing, especially after beating a Colorado team that we all thought was really good. But they've done nothing outside of that. A good showing, I guess you could say, at North Carolina, but doors blown off by rival Florida. Didn't beat Georgia at home, who I think we can all agree is not good. We've talked about the SEC and we didn't talk about them, and just really, really underwhelming.
Yeah, I don't know if they could beat SMU, South Florida, Winthrop. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
if they can win these next four home games. And I really thought that this
And
team was going to have a bounce back season. I just don't think
right,
they are.
Leonard Hamilton has had a great run there. I thought a lot of the things he did there, he was being underappreciated for. But the last year, and especially this year, they just don't look like it. I mean, they look like not even an NIT team.
Here's the upcoming schedule. Some notable games here include the North Carolina Kentucky game on Saturday, NC State Tennessee also coming up on Saturday. Clemson at Memphis we mentioned.
Yeah.
Uh,
Can we pull up
sneak.
one
I
more
was gonna
team,
say,
Chad?
yeah, I was gonna say real quickly. There's a sneaky good Hofstra at Duke game coming up tomorrow night.
Oh,
But go ahead, which
Hofstra
team?
Duke. I thought you were going to say a sneaky good, a team that is again really quiet, but when you look at their profile, it looks pretty decent. I want to get your all's thoughts on Virginia Tech.
Titel, what do you think? I'll pull them up right here. They beat Iowa State.
They have a signature win. They have no bad
Boise,
losses.
yeah,
I think that they are going to be tested with Vermont. I hope they're not looking ahead to American. Not that anybody would.
yeah,
Metrics are met, like offense and defense outside the top 60. I do like Mike Young a lot. And in a normal year, beating Louisville would be great. This year,
Yeah, I didn't even see the Louisville win because it's grouped in there with the Valpos and the Campbells of the
yeah.
world. But, let's uh, let's jump over to the Big Ten Conference. First of all, do not trust any fake John Rothstein accounts.
What is
Uh,
going? Yeah,
Jawan
I was.
Howard is still the head coach at Michigan. There's a fake John Rothstein account that tweeted he had stepped down. However, there was some news coming out of Michigan here that apparently he was involved in an altercation with another member of the coaching staff just over the past few days here, and the school is looking into what to do about that. Uh, so not a good sign here if you're the head coach for Michigan in any sport, apparently. It's just uh,
Um, yeah, John Rothstein. He fooled me a couple times.
yeah. If it is Jom Rothstein, do not follow that account. Just
Yeah,
a warning here.
what's wrong with JON guys?
yeah,
Jom as in
Ah,
Mary.
oh, there you go.
yeah.
Jam Rothstein. Griggs, Purdue, a real nice win though this week, taking down Alabama.
Yeah, and I still think I know
Nice
that they
bounce
didn't.
back from that loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've played one true road game and they didn't win it. It's the only game they haven't won. And I realize I'm always critical of teams that until they get a couple of road wins, but I still think that this is one of the best teams, if not the best in the country. One of the things I will be critical of them on, if we could pull up their profile real quick, Chad, I just wish they would have challenged themselves. I mean, you know, I just don't know if they're preparing themselves for the
They got another cupcake coming up this week, that Arizona game too.
yeah, Arizona. But
Uh,
my
well,
God, look at that! Like Marquette, Tennessee, Alabama, Gonzaga, Arizona. Like, wow.
that could be a run to a national championship. Those could be the last four
Yeah,
games on the run to a national championship.
right. Yeah.
Uh, well, what about the team that they did lose to, Titel? How about Northwestern, now in the top 25 in the AP poll as of today?
Well, deservedly so. Chris Collins has the program going in the right direction. Obviously, Boo Buie is a legitimate All-American candidate, which is something we have not said about a Northwestern player much in the past 75 years. Many cupcakes ahead. I think they're going to be favored against Arizona State, which is something I don't think I would have said even a year or two ago. I have nothing but good things, and they have their signature win against Purdue in overtime. So I think this is a top 25 resume.
Yeah, and then we look at the rest of the conference here. First of all, Griggs, I keep looking at this Ohio State team, and I wanted to believe in them, but then they go and they lose to Penn State. So, what is going on with this team?
That was a real surprise. I don't know how cataclysmic it's ultimately going to turn out to be. I still think Ohio State is good and will be good, and Penn State is not and won't be. I'm big on Alabama, and so I particularly like that win over them. But yeah, I don't have an answer. That was one of those. It was in the game was going on when there was so much else going on that just wasn't one that you thought or that I thought that I was needed to pay that much attention to. And when you saw the score of it, you're like, how the hell did that even happen? This is where I got to admit that sometimes when there's 6 games going on at once that are important, I can't watch all of them. I actually didn't watch of it.
One other team I want to bring up here, Titel on the right. I think Minnesota is horrible this year. They've looked absolutely awful. Yet Nebraska lost there and then turned around and beat Michigan State at home. Is this Nebraska team any good, or
No.
is this an indictment on Michigan State, or what's going on with Nebraska basketball?
Can it be both? Let me give you an idea of how long it's been since the Huskers won 20 or more games in a season. It's happened once in the past 15 years. It was in 2018. Who was the head coach, everyone?
It was Tim Miles. It was
Tim Miles. You got
yes.
it. They do have the pair of double-digit losses to start December, but Fred Hoiberg got things going in the right direction. 7-point home win over Sparty on Sunday without their regular starting forward, Josiah Alec, who was out due to injury, which makes it even more impressive to me. They do not have things getting any easier heading to Kansas State on Sunday. 2 cupcakes after that. They should be 10-3 when they host the Hoosiers on January 3rd. And one of the big keys, Juwan Gary. So he was the one who replaced Alec in the starting lineup and had 20 points in his very first start of the year. Last year, he was a regular starter, started the first 17 games, missed the entire second half of the season with left shoulder surgery. Looks like it's feeling much better this year.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I don't think they win this Kansas State game. I think this is a team that's we're gonna be looking as a home court hero at the end of the year. I just have a feeling that this team which is a good stepping stone. You've got to start winning the home games first before you start winning the road games. But I think this team is going to knock off a few more scalps in this conference. Maybe not
talking
Purdue.
about Nebraska.
I'm talking about Nebraska. I could see something like the Wisconsin game in February being a win there. Something, games like that, or the Indiana game even on January 3rd.
Well, I'm not that. I think they can beat Indiana, but that's more of an indictment on Indiana. This conference, a lot of teams in it. Certainly not Purdue, but one of the teams that you had up there a second ago, Michigan State, just real disappointing, as has been, as has Indiana. I know Indiana's record's bloated, but it's predominantly home bye games that they had to sweat out.
Indiana did win at Michigan, so
they did win. Yeah, they won at Michigan. They did not beat Auburn. I don't know if you caught much of that. They did not beat Auburn.
Hey. They could if they beat Kansas this weekend, it changes completely.
Yes, it does. Okay.
But can we
I cannot argue with that statement.
Can we take a second? When's the last time we saw Tom Izzo at the bottom of the conference standings, like in the past 25 years? It's ridiculous.
It really is.
There's one team in this conference with a losing overall record. It is Michigan State.
Unbelievable.
Despite that, Torvik still has them as number 21 team in the nation. So,
well, the predictive metrics do like them. Like if you look at the predictives, I know 35, 36, it's still not as good as we thought they'd be at the beginning of the year, but that's still inside the bubble. Is this going to be one of those cases that, like, once you get in the Christmas break and the 20-hour weeks go away and you can practice 20 hours a day if you want, is this going to be a team that just kind of got off to a late start, slow out of the gate, that rallies and comes back, and by the end of the year, no one remembers that they were ever 4-5.
Though they got to make up for 0-2 in conference already also at this point.
Yeah,
So it's going to be rough, I think. But they can. I think the wins, the games, the chances will be there in this conference.
yeah.
I highlighted the 4 key games, I think, for this week. Other than the absolutely huge Battle of Chicago, I'm not talking about Northwestern DePaul. I'm talking about Wednesday night, Chicago State, Northwestern.
Northwest. Woo-hoo. Yeah,
Uh,
that's a better game than Northwestern DePaul, I think.
Obviously, circle Kansas at Indiana, circle Ohio State, UCLA, circle Purdue, Arizona, and double and triple circle that one. Don't miss that game.
Yeah.
uh, West Coast Conference, Griggs. We mentioned it briefly already. Gonzaga did lose that game to Washington. Any cause for concern for the Zags?
I
Heading to
don't.
the UConn game coming up this weekend?
Uh, there's concerns that Gonzaga might not be a top 10 team after all, but there's no concerns whatsoever that they're a solid top 20 team. And it's one of those games that they were bound to lose eventually. Like when you it's one of those rivalry games. It did have some heat to it. They were on the road. Washington isn't bad. It wasn't like it was an easy game to win. It was one that they probably thought they should have won. I'm sure they're disappointed that they didn't. They've probably, since it's been 19 years, forgot what it even feels like to lose to them. But no, I don't think they're concerned. Now, having said that, when you look at this resume, it does look a little bit bland right now. With not nothing in tier 1, whereas most of the time we're used to seeing
Well,
Gonzaga.
there's 3 more big games in the schedule: the UConn game, the San
Right.
Diego State, and don't forget for February they go to Kentucky.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's reason for concern. They just lost to Washington. Once in 20 times, it's bound to happen eventually.
Titel, is there reason to start believing in St. Mary's again suddenly after that huge win over Colorado State on the road?
I was gonna say ask Kyle Neptune because the only team more schizophrenic than Villanova is St. Mary's. Look at this weird resume with the craziness. I was ready to write them off. They started 3-5, but if you do a deep dive, top 20 strength of schedule and atrocious free throw shooting, 59%, like that explains why you're 3-5. They had the 3-point win at previously undefeated Colorado State on Saturday, which shows you can win games when you're only making 7 of 12 free throws. But the X factor in that one is the Rams were missing their starter, Josiah Strong, and their super sub, Jalen Lake. So that one deserves an asterisk on the resume. They head to Phoenix on Saturday for a neutral site game against the Runnin' Rebels and then a couple of cupcakes before what's looking like a surprisingly tough pair of home games to wrap up non-conference play, Missouri State and Kent State back-to-back. Coach Randy Bennett has been surviving with defense, 61 points allowed, number 9 in the nation. And I wanted to wonder out loud what is going on with senior guard Alex Dukas. So last year, this team won 27 games. He was arguably the second most important player on the team. And then Logan Johnson graduated, so I assumed he'd become the most important player on the team. His minutes are down, his production's down. So I hope somebody can throw another shrimp on the Barbie for this kid because he is still Australian. He is no longer a sensation.
Ooh.
Am I wrong?
No, I agree with you. It's just, we're at this point here where this is looking like a single bid league unless something crazy happens in the conference tournament.
Yeah.
But obviously, Gonzaga is there. They've got that huge game with UConn, and that is probably the only game worth circling this week in this conference. Let's jump over to the American because we had that. We mentioned Memphis a few times, and I want to take a closer look at them, Griggs especially. They had a pretty nice week. It needed overtime against a not that great VCU team, but it was a road win, and then that win at A&M on Sunday.
The win at A&M was fantastic, and this is a Memphis team that's put together a really good resume when you start to look at it. The win against A&M, I think Mizzou, although they're 91 in the net right now, I think that's a really good tournament team, and that's a road win. Michigan and Arkansas. So while you look at the resume, I think that they have wins against teams that are going to be better at the end of the year than they are now. The loss at Ole Miss was really competitive. It's one that they easily could have won. And this is just a team that's playing really well. They have Clemson and Virginia coming into their house. The Vanderbilt game's at Memphis. For some reason, I was thinking that was in Nashville, but I guess it's at Memphis. And so those are, at least respectable teams, especially Clemson and especially Virginia.
There's a
Memphis,
way more than just a respectable team for those first two, I think.
yeah. But they have the chance to put together a not just a tournament resume, but a really solid resume, and to continue to climb the rankings. I've just been impressed with them, and I just think their metrics and their profile is going to continue to improve. And I think some of the teams that they've beaten, particularly Mizzou and Arkansas, are also going to improve.
Yeah, the thing is, they're not going to have much competition after this Virginia game all the way until February 25th when they get their first of their two FAU games. Those games are both at the end of the season. Uh,
Yeah.
and that FAU team there, Title, I pulled them up on the right. That game on Tuesday night against Illinois, even though Illinois won that game, this Florida Atlantic team I thought looked like a team that can compete with anybody in the nation that game, even though they lost it.
They can. This is the
Yeah.
kind of game that a team who returns like 99% of their
Mhm.
offense from a Final Four run last year, like schedules a tough team because they think they can beat them. And the offense was good enough to beat them. The defense was certainly not. You allowed Damask and Shannon, I think, to each score 30 points while shooting like 70%, which is unheard of. And as you see in the Ken Palm rankings, the offense is top 6 in the nation. So I think that they're going to have an easy time at FIU. I hope they're not overlooking St. Bonaventure because that's the ultimate trap game between number 300 in the net and number 1 in the net. So focus on the Bonnies, then have a week off before you play the Wildcats. And no, I would not worry about FAU one bit.
Don't worry about FAU. The upcoming schedule here, uh, uh, there are the upcoming games. Obviously the Clemson Memphis game is the game to circle in the American for this week. Um, what we got? The Mountain West. Oh, we got error messages coming up.
We
How
got
about
error
that?
messages coming up. All right.
There's the Mountain West Conference. We already mentioned Colorado State suffering that loss to St. Mary's. Uh, well, Tata, let me go with you. How about one of the other teams with only one loss here? Utah State,
How about Utah State?
picking up huge wins over the likes of San Diego and Northwest Nazarene this week.
Whoop,
I
big
mean,
week.
I love first year coaches, but you got to give it Kenny Sprinkle the credit. He left Bozeman, Montana. He came to Logan, Utah, and he's 9-1. Only a 6-point overtime loss at Bradley. 3 wins against top 125 teams: Akron, Stephen F., Irvine. Tough week ahead. Road trip to Santa Clara, then neutral site against San Francisco in Salt Lake City. And as a coach, even a first year coach, it's important to know your strengths and weaknesses. So this team has been terrible, frankly, from both 1-point and 3-point range. They are killing it inside the arc, 62%, number 5 in the nation. And the best thing that Sprinkle brought with him, not a motion offense, not a winning attitude, but his power forward at Montana State, great Osabor, who's hailing from the UK. If you look at the big man's stats, 20 points, 9 boards, 2 blocks a game, shooting 64% this year. His stats aren't just good, they're great.
Griggs, I pulled up San Diego State on the right here. And this is a team that every time they take the court, they look to me like they're going to lose a game. They only did it twice so far, including the Grand Canyon loss earlier, about I guess it was last Tuesday or so. But again, just over the weekend, UC Irvine. Irvine had that game late,
They
and
did.
and just like with the Washington game, and just like with the Cal game, and just like with the UC San Diego game, the Aztecs are finding ways to win games that they should be losing.
That's a fair way of putting it. One of the things that was so stunning about the game against UC Irvine was that they had a 16-point lead, and this is the show. Like one of the toughest arenas, most hostile student sections, and to have a game. And the Eaters are good. If you watch Under the Radar, you know that we all think that. But to be in that kind of control and lose it against a team like that was a little bit alarming. And not to take anything away from the Eaters, but you're right. They're finding ways to win, but should they have to be finding ways to win some of the games that they needed to find a way to win?
And when you start playing the road games at New Mexico, at Boise,
Yeah.
at Colorado State, at Nevada, at Utah State, and
Yeah.
you got a game at Gonzaga too before all that, I don't know. I mean, that tells me that this team's going to get blown out of the buildings in those games.
Yeah. And I want to like this team. They went to UC San Diego. That was not a easy place to do. It's certainly not easy going to Grand Canyon. They didn't have to schedule the Eaters. The UC Irvine, a really tough team to play against. but yeah, like they just haven't looked good, even though their record is pretty good.
Yeah, I think there is cause for concern for Aztecs fans. We'll see if they could start playing a lot better than this. But here's the upcoming schedule in the Mountain West. Um, I don't really know what we're really circling here, uh, if anything.
Yeah, Utah
So
State. That's a neutral game. Never mind.
yeah,
Yeah, Nevada
Utah
out at
State's Utah State,
Hawaii.
San Francisco. San Francisco's had a little bit of life here.
Yeah,
So far this season, maybe circle that one. But
I recall
let's
the
jump
Battle
over.
of New Mexico being a little scandalous last year, right? Though.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
This is the second. They've already played once, haven't they?
Yeah, they're playing twice
Without
this season.
incident.
This
So
is round two of that series already. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
I'm glad that they got that back on the schedule. I know there was talk of not resuming it right away, but they resumed it both in football and basketball, I think. So
the
everyone's got some heat to it.
A10 conference, it's this conference that it looks like it's going to be sticking around here above the radar, including Griggs, St. Joseph's Hawks, uh, picking
Yeah,
up some wins, including knocking Princeton out of the ranks of the undefeated just yesterday.
that was a great basketball game. It was one of those games that I wish would have gotten more national attention because I think first of all, it was a well played game between two really good teams, but I think that is one that the committee was definitely watching and that will definitely be talked about. If you pull up Joe's real quick here, I really like this profile. They got the win at Nova. I know Nova's had their issues. The close double overtime loss at Kentucky, and they've got a real head scratcher. I gotta ask Tytel this. He's the committee guessing expert. How bad does that smell? And does it? How much does it offset the good things they've done? Because they've done quite a bit of good things.
And that's the Texas A&M
Yeah.
Commerce home loss.
Smells terrible, but it was early in the season by 3 points, so I don't know that I'm gonna keep them in or out. I think it might just be like a seeding thing rather than a do you get in thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they got an interesting road test at College of Charleston, still a week and a half away, but that's their last non-conference road test. Not a bad Charleston team at all. But I tell them
Right.
right there, I pulled up another team with only 2 losses overall, the Revolutionaries of George Washington.
We like to joke that Howard's the best team in EC, but I think that GW is giving them a run for their money.
Uh-huh.
16-16 last year as the Colonials, 8-2 this year as the Revolutionaries with a pair of home wins last week. 3 cupcakes to finish the month. They should be 11-2 when they host Fordham in the conference opener on January 3rd. And they're getting it done with defense. Top 20 in the nation in like every single category. Defensive rebounds, blocks per game, opponent field goal percentage. And if you're looking for a comeback player of the year, I got one for you in freshman forward Garrett Johnson from down the road in Alexandria, Virginia. So 2021, doctors found a tumor in his hip. He started his career at Princeton, but due to the medical stuff, he had to deal with that and then later transferred. Underwent 9 rounds of chemotherapy,
Ooh.
and now he's not just like a bench guy. He's like one of the best players at this on this 8-2 team. 13.7 boards a game, shooting 40% behind the arc, 86% at the free throw line. Give it up for Garrett Johnson.
Yes. Team on the left there quickly pulled up was the Dayton Flyers.
Yeah.
They have won 4 straight. Big game against Cincinnati coming up here this week. The problem with this Dayton profile is they didn't give themselves one. They only gave themselves two real chances against real tough competition this year, and went
Yeah.
0-2 in those games.
They did, and they played pretty well against Northwestern. Houston, I think, was just a little
That's out of
too
their
far
league.
out of their league, but not a bad showing against Northwestern. And that's another question. Now, obviously, if they win out, it's not a question. But
I think
another
I
one
think
for
they really.
Titel: is there enough there for them to get inside the bubble? How many strikes do they have left? Because this is a good Dayton team. They're better than I thought they would be.
They have maybe 1 or 2 strikes left. They're 7-2 with like 20 games left. If they drop 2 in the regular season and are like 25-4 and then end up 26-5 after losing the A10 tyranny, I'd like to see a little more meat on the bone. That tier 1 win absence is lacking, but
Yeah,
maybe a couple strikes to play with.
yeah,
I'm gonna pull St. Joe's back up here at the right one more time, just because as we're doing this, I noticed a quirk in their schedule here. The two other teams we mentioned here, Dayton, George Washington, They only play them once, and they get both those teams at home. So good advantage for
Yeah.
St. Joe's in terms of the conference schedule and try to win the A10 this year.
Or well, if you're Joe's and you're trying to make a case, well, Joe's has sort of made their case more
Uh,
than Dayton has.
well,
Dayton
you've
probably needs that game at Joe's, like more than they needed at home.
the other game to circle this week is LaSalle at Miami. LaSalle's had a little bit of life, I would think, not a
Yeah.
lot, but Miami coming off the loss. Could there be a surprise in that one? Uh, one more team we want to quickly mention here, and that is over in the Sun Belt Conference. It is that first place team. It is the undefeated number 20 in both polls now, the James Madison Dukes. Uh, Picked up a win at Old Dominion. Not Nothing much to write home about. But they do have now 3 road wins, and Griggs, they've got a couple more non-conference road wins they can pick up, even though they're only against Hampton and Morgan State here the next couple weeks.
Right. Their only real shot at quality is App State, and I don't know if they're. I don't think they. I'm not predicting that they can win out. And again, another question for Tytel: how many strikes do they have? They haven't used any yet. The one thing I will say, and it's just sort of that the one game that they got on opening night that really got everybody's attention, and understandably so. There's some rust on that now.
They are one of a group of 7 teams that's left undefeated, though. So I think there's
Yeah.
still some weight to that to be given.
Right, but they deserve credit for the Michigan State win, but it isn't going to be like that high caliber win that we probably originally thought when they got up there, when they initially got it. So, I yeah, I don't know what to. It's just kind of hard. There's too many moving parts, but I definitely think they're good. I like them coming into the year. It's just, is there enough there to get them inside the bubble?
So the question is, as far as strikes, so what if they have 30 regular season games on the schedule? What if they go 28-2 and are swept by App State, and then get to like 30-3 and App State beats them in the title game? Do you put in a 30-3 team with 3 losses to App State? I say yes, but I want to see what Chad says.
I agree with you, because 3 lost to App State. You also say they only lost to one team all season.
Right.
You also throw in there is that TBA there on February 10th. That will be against a MAC team to be determined, and I assume they're going to get the best team in the MAC. So
Yeah.
there'll be a home game, and it should be something that's at least another tier 2 win for them if they pick that up and
Yeah.
only lose the App State games.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to see one App State win, though, even if it's just the home game.
If they
But
do all that, even if they get swept by App State, I think that's enough, because like, I know Charleston won 31 last year and was seeded at least outside the bubble. They were seeded below the first 4, which indicates that 30 would not have been enough for them had they not gotten that 31st win in the conference championship game. But that team didn't have a win at Kent State, at Michigan State. Even Southern Illinois is probably better than most of what Charleston was able to do last year. Did they beat? Did they have any top 100 wins? I don't remember.
Charleston last year, we'd have to double check on that. But
Yeah.
I think that was the problem. But
Yeah.
the other problem, Griggs, is can these Southern Illinois and Michigan State games remain top 100 by the end
Well,
of the year?
Charleston did beat Kent State and Virginia Tech last year at home, which were like barely top 100 wins.
Okay.
Barely top 100 at home. Yeah, so they need Michigan. If Michigan State turns things around, James Madison is a lot stronger. Also, getting a win over App State. App State does have the Auburn win, so there is, that's why App State is got anything this year.
Yeah.
On that note, that's all for the show. Other than some final thoughts, so Tytel, let me throw it over to you.
So I wish Joby was here, because I'm going to give a shout out to his good friend Ryan Dunn. This is the one from UVA, not the guy who used to be part of the Jackass cast, just so we're clear. The past 30 years...
Griggs is still a jackass. So
I am still a jackass, yeah.
Too easy. Past 3 decades, there's been exactly one player to have a season with 2.5 steals per game and 2.5 blocks per game in the same season. The legendary Damian Saunders of Duquesne back in 2010. And even though Dunn's played only 9 games this year, I know it's early, he's got 2.6 steals and 2.6 blocks a game. He's not a big-time scorer, and frankly, he's a terrible three-point shooter. But the amazing part is that he's putting up these crazy stats in just 26 minutes a game. It's not like he's playing triple overtime games, 50 minutes a game. And UVA's 8-1. So if there's anybody out there who thinks defense is not an important part of winning, I got 2 words for you. You're done.
Griggs, why don't you
Uh,
finish the show off?
Uh, uh, Final thought is kind of just stating the obvious. This past week was a lot of fun for college basketball. It was the first weekend that there wasn't also football going on, although with us, I know that that doesn't matter, but I think the spotlight on it was a little bigger because of that. And for whatever reason, I don't know if this is done by design, if they want to schedule these games for the last week before the students go home, but we had a lot of out of conference rivalry games. There was Xavier Cincinnati, BYU Utah, West Virginia Pitt earlier in the week, Kansas Missouri, of course. And I know I'm leaving some out, but it felt like that it was a lot of good games, but a lot
Yeah,
of good
Rutgers, Seton
rivalries.
Hall.
Yeah, Rutgers Seton Hall, another one. I don't know. Did Creighton and Nebraska play this week or was it the previous week? I don't. It could be. But anyway, Gonzaga, Washington, another one. So again, that was just a really fun week, and I think it was really good for the sport to be in the spotlight like that because there are times I wonder if college basketball is fading, and getting lost in the shuffle. And after this past week, I no longer think that the arenas were full, the ratings were good, and the games were really exciting.
They were. We do have a slow week this week during the week.
Yeah.
There's some huge games coming up this weekend, though. But on that note, I do want to thank everybody for joining us. So, on behalf of John Titel, David Griggs, I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again real soon.